Let's make another video. This is going to be video number 3, associated with my thought process of what is the best subwoofer configuration to load in that Ford Transit. Excuse me, still under the weather. This has been like a 2 or 3 week long cold for me. I apologize. All right, so I put into an AI app. I asked the question, help me run some evaluation, search through Parts Express inventory, help me identify the best 6 subwoofer options for my application. And I told AI my budget is $1,600 total, and the RMS power limit is about 6,000 watts. And I'm looking for the most VD possible, and however many drivers fit within that configuration. So I have set a $1,600 budget because I think that that's going to be correct for this build. And I predict a realistic 6,000 watt RMS. Gives me the ability to run higher impedance amplifiers so that they can stay cool, be healthy, be efficient. I think that that's about how this build's going to go. So what did we get? I chose Parts Express because I'm biased towards them. I like their products. I'm not into mainstream car audio. I did included a Skar Audio driver in this evaluation, the EVL series, which is within my price range and actually models very similarly to the Dayton Audio Ultimax 18, which this is totally a viable driver in my opinion. I think it's attractive. I don't mind Skar Audio. I'm not a brand snob. I look at Snap-on the way that I look at something like Sundown Audio. It might be the best, but I just don't see myself spending or having that kind of money to throw at something. And if Skar Audio gets you close might be close enough. To me, Skar Audio is a little bit like Harbor Freight. A lot of Harbor Freight tools work just fine and are relatively affordable, but you get what you pay for, and you kind of need to know what you're buying. So anyway, back to my eval here. So I think this is going to be interesting. Hopefully I can be somewhat entertaining despite my cold and despite the crudeness of these videos. For any of you who subscribe or pay any attention, I'm grateful. I look forward to sharing this content, and I hope I have valuable insight here. So here we go. The first driver that the AI app recommended was the GRS 12SW-4HE12. So GRS, if you don't know, is like the most entry-level brand I've ever seen. Like, their products are just as absolutely the most inexpensive. I think the GRS stood for the Great Replacement Speaker or something. Very, very inexpensive, which they're somewhat appealing to me. There's something fun. You can get them pretty cheap. These 12-inch drivers are only $75 a piece, which honestly, I think within the last few months they had a price bump. They used to be only like $59 a piece. The recommendation was to run 21 of these drivers. Odd number, but we're gonna map it with 21 drivers because supposedly this falls within our price range and within our power range. So if we go over here and plot this, I'm not going to zoom in immediately with the camera. You're going to have to bear with the fact that it's a very small graph because I'm going to be bouncing around here. I'll zoom in on the graph here in a little bit. The total VD in cubic centimeters for 21 of these 12s, they've got only 12.5 millimeters of excursion. Not a lot of excursion. The total VD for 21 of them is 13,318. Comparing that to 4 Dayton Audio Ultimax 18s, which have a total VD of 13,260, there's only like, I don't know, 50, is that right? There's only 50 VD, cubic centimeters of VD, like 60, let's just call it 60. There's 60 cubic centimeters difference between the 418s and 21 of these 12s. That being because there's half the X Max. But they're very, very similar. Model very similarly. And actually, if we plot both together, the orange one is the 4 Ultimax 18s. And the yellow plot is the 21 12-inch drivers. At peak, right about 22 hertz, they're both very similar. So I guess I jumped the gun a little bit. The FS of these 12s is 22 hertz. Power rating is 250 watts apiece. Like I said, the excursion, 12.5 millimeters per. This graph suggests that they have the sim peak at 22 hertz for output, which makes sense. They're both have essentially identical VD, maximum displacement. But for some reason, this is graphing with at least 3 dB more output as we increase in frequency, and even a little bit below that in frequency. This graph to me suggests that the 21 12-inch drivers for the same, well, it's a little bit more money because I think we're at $1,400 for 418s, where we're right at $1,600. $200 isn't that much difference. Yeah, the 2112s does graph better looking at this. Cone displacement is right about where I would map it, roughly half of what I think it'll actually be doing. Net velocity is very similar. This is mapping these two configurations in the same enclosure space. What we've calculated for the maximum volume of enclosure that we're going to use in this situation. So that's kind of interesting. The problem with running 2112s is that that's a lot of drivers. I have no idea how you're going to configure 21 drivers and get all that acoustical energy to be driven forward into the cabin area of the vehicle. You'd have to build some sort of a really complex zigzag shape, or you'd have to put it's a lot of drivers. I admit that they're inexpensive, but there's just no way that I can build an enclosure without those drivers being mounted on all surfaces of the enclosure. And yeah, I guess it would work, but it's just not, I don't see it as viable. So even though it graphs really well, it's kind of unrealistic. It's kind of difficult. And maybe it'd be a fun challenge to do. Maybe at some point I'll have the budget to procure those drivers and figure it out, do the best I can. For now, I'm looking for realistic simplicity and something that's doable. And it's not so much better that I'm motivated to try it. Like, it's similar. Let's go on to the next thing that AI recommended. The second best, because like I said, it's only about 60 cubic centimeters of VD difference, was the Quad 18s, Ultimax 18s, which we've already got graphed here, which we've already discussed. Let's see. The next thing was they want 11 GRS 15s. So it's the same thing. Here's the driver. I think it's an entry level driver. It's stamped steel basket. It's pulp polymer paper cone. conventional material. Like it's pretty chill. It's pretty simple. So the recommendation was 11, 15. So let's see how that models. Where's that at? Right here. Okay. I'm not going to zoom in yet. We'll discuss it more in detail. Essentially, it's claiming the same at peak, and it mirrors the 12 configuration. It'd be easier to put 11 15s into a driver, but even then, 11 15s, I don't know where I'd put them. So what's the total VD here? We're at 10,900, basically 11,000. So we're what? 2,000, just over 2,000 cubic millimeters less. Even though it shows that it's got the same peak potential. I think that's interesting. I don't know. To me, it should be less, but total vent velocities, it's just about the same. It shows it being a little bit lower on the frequency on the graph. For some reason, we're peak vent velocity at 15 hertz, despite having been tuned to 22 hertz. All these enclosures are tuned to 22 hertz. That's just a personal preference because we get a little bit of extension below that, and somewhere between 15 and 32 hertz is like where I want the power. And if you tune in between those, you get a little bit of extension on either end, right? Vent velocity is also very similar to, I mean, based on my math, if this is modeled conservatively and you get about double that, we're showing 10 millimeters of excursion with these 11, 15-inch drivers. So I think that there's a chance that with the amount of power I have listed here, I mean, it just means that they'll need less power, which also means that they won't be producing quite as much. So that might be realistic. Because I've got more power than they can truly handle, they're modeling this way, where if we were to decrease this power, that would be more in realistic range. I just don't think this is loud. The VD does represent, in my opinion, the fact that when you bring the excursion into a usable range, the amount of output would decrease, which is realistic. I hope that made sense to you. One of the flaws with me trying to represent this is I can't apply a different power to each of these different models. The way that this primitive technology is here is that I can apply one power rating and everything we model is modeled based off of that. So it's a little bit flawed. How much power I can really apply to these is different. And one of the things I'd say is that I don't think I can apply 5,600 watts to 11 of these. Let's see what it is. They're rated at 300 watts a piece times 11. They only want, let's just say 4,000. Because, likely you can overdrive them just a little bit for a little while, get a little bit more out of them. Because a thermal rating it's like based on time, right? Like a driver might be able to handle, several hundred watts over their rating if it's just for a brief moment. I think that's one of the reasons you get a peak wattage rating versus an RMS rating. That's supposed to kind of give you an idea that like 1% duty cycle, you might be able to apply peak power rating, but for an RMS, like 100% duty cycle, I think that's how that goes. Something like that. Did that make sense? So we're definitely way overpowering these 15s in order to get them to represent the same peak output. So that is, not only is it hard to fit 11 15s in the enclosure space we have available, but because they don't handle as much power, that also makes me think that maybe I jumped the gun regarding, I think these are rated at 250 a piece. Let's do the calculation here. 21 times 250. Yeah, it's roughly the same amount of power for the 12s. So I think that the graphing the 12 versus the 18 is pretty realistic. However, this green graph for the the GSR 15s is not as realistic. The next thing that AI recommended was Ultimax 8. The Ultimax 15s. They wanted 5. I'm just going to go ahead and model 6. It's a little bit over the budget, but not by too much. It's like 1650 or 1700, but just for the sake of, I wanted 6 of them. 5 is an odd number. Let's see how that graphs. That one is here, and we've already talked about this in my previous video. I used this as an example. So one of the first things I notice is that instead of having a nice smooth wide response curve, it sort of drops off really quickly, and this is almost 100% the way it's represented when I model things. If the tuning frequency that we set for the enclosure is below the FS of the driver. This driver has an FS of 29 hertz, and it directly correlates with the fact that we do see a much quicker, much steeper roll-off as predicted. Does it going to affect the actual sound output? Let's see here. Cone displacement. That is the red trace. It seems to want to hit peak at roughly the same time that the 18s. So is it affected? It looks less desirable on the graph because how quickly this rolls off. Would we ever acoustically be able to notice or experience a difference? I think that this has to do with how far the FS of the driver is relative to the tuning frequency. If you get the two far enough apart, I do think that it starts to give us issues. And I think we'll have a representation of that here. So the last one I want to look at is I modeled 4 18s by Skar Audio. These are the 1200 watt rated, 1250 watts, I guess. It's basically, it's almost identical to the specifications of the Ultimax 18s that I'm biased towards. This doesn't quite have as much X-Max. It's only 23.5, but everything else, power handling, cone displacement, cost, these are a hair cheaper. Ultimax are about $350 a piece. So I could save almost $100 if I ran 4 of these in my build over the Ultimax 18s. Let's see how it models. Where's my icon here? It didn't work. Let's take a look here and plot it. So the FS of this driver is 31.2 hertz. So it's a hair higher. And again, we get that really sharp roll off. I'm tempted to zoom in here at this point for you guys. Let's see if we can make that work. Let's zoom in so you guys can see a little bit more accurately this graph. We'll start it over. 2112s. This is how it models. Ford Ultimax 18s, basically the same. Let's do 1115s. These are the most entry level. I think they're like, how much are they? Something like 120, 130 a piece, but 11 of them. The problem with the way that this is graphed is that they can't handle that much power. They can only handle probably closer to 4,000 watts, which, let's call that 6,000. Like, they would be 2 to 3 dB quieter, roughly. But you can see how that plots. The next thing that needs to get modeled is 615s. These are the Ultimax 15s, which exceeds our budget by a hair, but peak output is roughly right there. There's a direct correlation. And then these are the Skar Audio EVL. Man, I feel really tongue-tied for some reason right now. I'm not entirely sure what's wrong. My intelligence is fading. These indicate that they would have a peak output that exceeds all of these others right at the 20 hertz range. And for the most part, it models just like the Ultimax drivers do. Which honestly, based on the simplicity of designing a box for 418s, I've showed you guys already, but I've drawn this up. This is a rough, oh, I'm sorry, I gotta zoom out so you can actually see it. This is a rough drawing. I've already showed you, but this would be pretty easy to build. How do I work my mouse? It'd be pretty easy. 212s, a port, I'm sorry, 218s, a port sideways, 218s, pretty simple build, really. Some internal bracing, like that's pretty cut and dry. That's pretty smooth. I'm sure that with the port velocity that this thing would have, this thing would have to be windy as can be, and only need 6,000 watts of RMS electrical energy. Like, under $2,000, $1,500, I can have plenty of amplifier for this application. What I think you can get 6,000 watt amp for under $1,000. So if I double that, I can have higher impedance configuration, and everything will run really well. Yeah, so I didn't color these. My point of showing you that was that honestly, the way that the Skar Audio drivers model and the way the Ultimax models, the only reason I would run the Dayton Audio Ultimax is because it's just not mainstream. It's less known, and I'm biased towards their products. I think that their lineup is great. They don't stamp logos on their drivers. There's a simplicity and beauty in what they're doing, and I just really like it. Let's pull them up just for fun. Let's pull them up. Yeah, there's a carbon fiber, very clean, it's just they're just very simple. There's a little bit of bling there. There's a little bit of a shiny, but it's, I don't know. I think it's tasteful. I think it's desirable. I think it's attractive. I noticed something when I was looking at the Skar Audio that's interesting. The Dayton Audio lineup has dual spiders that are separated, and I think that that's a very good design. I believe that this Skar Audio series has that exact same configuration. If we look, I don't know how well the camera is going to depict it. You can look them up, but can I zoom in on this? Maybe I'll just hold the camera here really quick. You can see that there's what looks to be a spider sandwiched below this plastic piece, right? You can see it there clear as day. That makes me think perhaps this design is a similar separated spider, dual spider configuration, which it's just a design. I just like that design. I think that having dual separated spiders, it supports a linearity when you're exciting the drivers back and when you're moving the thing. I think it's a good design. Obviously, there's tons of designs that only have a single spider, and they work just fine. So it's not like it's a necessity. I just like it. I just think that if you're gonna do something like that, I think that that's ideal. So what's the point of this video? Back over here. I am still at the moment quite biased towards running 418s and Ultimax 18s. I have not come up with a design yet that really is indicating that something else is better. Granted, I could have asked AI to just scour the internet for drivers that have high VD and are affordable within my range. I think that by adding the Skar Audio, everybody knows that Skar Audio is the most entry-level price tag. And I don't believe that there's another car audio or subwoofer manufacturer out there that's producing something in this price ranges. So, if I was trying to stick with something that is definitely car audio branded, whether a good rep or a bad rep, everyone loves to hate Skar. I could run Skar and everybody would be like, oh yeah, I know Skar Audio. Dayton Audio is like that. Who? Never heard of them before. What else is useful to talk about in this video? I don't have it represented here exactly, but my best efforts to model a complex bandpass enclosure have not been successful. I've been trying to pick my brain because all the really high output builds that I've seen, all the videos, when I try to like model what they're doing, it doesn't model well. These guys are shoving tons of drivers into very, very small enclosure space. And the only thing that makes sense is that they're able to compensate with just insane amounts of power. They're able to sort of push through the lack of enclosure volume and generate the high output, tons of displacement. And that's the only thing that makes any sense. Well, I mean, I'm just not motivated to model any of that. I'm not going to be playing with that much electrical energy, or those expensive drivers that can handle all that power and abuse. Let's talk about bandpass enclosures really quick. So I really like the data that AI gave me regarding bandpass enclosures. Basically, when it comes to designing a fourth order enclosure, right? So the low frequency chamber is sealed, and the bandpass meaning that there's a pass band. The sealed low frequency chamber determines like your low frequency cutoff, or what frequencies play above that. And my question was sort of, well, how do you know how large to make that enclosure? Because you hear everybody all the time say something like there's a 2-to-1 ratio, that golden ratio, 2-to-1 or even 3-to-1. But 3-to-1 what? Well, I believe that you want your low frequency sealed enclosure to be basically the same dimensions as if you were going to run a sealed enclosure. That QTS, QMS, QTS, whatever the optimum size enclosure is for optimum low frequency output, ends up being what you want your low frequency chamber to be sized to. And then if the golden ratio of 2-to-1 or even let's say 3-to-1, whatever that right ratio is, you just double or triple it for the high frequency chamber, and you tune the port so that whatever the max frequency that you want in your bandpass is. So why am I bringing this up? Why am I not building a fourth order bandpass enclosure for this build? I'm stuck on the VD is the absolute end-all be-all thing to focus on. And with a sealed rear chamber, you do not get to take very much advantage of the back of the cone. And even though there is typically a higher output from a bandpass enclosure than sealed or ported, in my particular application, I think that I'm just confident that I'm not going to be louder, or I'm not going to have the bandwidth that I want. I would have to have something like 8 or 10 cubic feet of internal enclosure volume for the rear chamber per driver. And then I got to have double that. Whether it's a fourth order or a sixth order enclosure, if I'm going to take advantage of the full VD at the power rating that these drivers can handle within my budget, I'm only going to be able to run 2 18s or something like 4 15s. And although that is less expensive in drivers and actual power needed, I don't think it's unrealistic, the cost of a build for 4 18s and the power for it. I just think that I'm better off running a conventional ported enclosure. Will I regret it? Do I wish I had the finances to build an enclosure and configure drivers for all of these and actually do real world testing? I'd like to. I'd like to have the time and money to do it and to share it on YouTube. I don't know. I'm just not motivated to do it. So I guess in conclusion, I'm trying to express to you guys that I've sort of worn myself out. I'm just already preconceived plan to run the 418s in a conventional ported enclosure that's walled off. It's going to be absolutely insane because the tubs and the port are only going to be 2 or 3 inches away from the headrest of the back, the chairs from the seating position. And tuning at 22 hertz, it's going to be ridiculous. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be cool to lean in the window of the vehicle and just see 418s staring at you right in the face. So I don't know that it's necessary unless I get questions, and honestly at the moment I'm not getting any views, and I don't plan to get views. I don't know anybody. I don't have some fancy marketing scheme or a big Facebook or YouTube following. Not yet anyway. I'm not even convinced that the way I'm doing this is a format that's consumable. It may be so hard to listen to me or watch. But I can at least say I'm doing it and putting in some effort here. So for those of you that are tuning in, I appreciate it. I hope I'm adding value. I hope I'm making some sense to you. I guess we'll call this a conclusion. I really think I'm done playing with all the options. I think I'm just convinced that I want to do the 418 ported enclosure. The box fits really well. It shapes really well. It models really well. I already have real world experience with 118 in my truck that I think is making all the right sounds. So I think we're good. I guess the next step is to start cutting some wood up and actually getting that box and design built. I'd like to put a shopping cart together and present it in a video so that I can show you all the equipment I intend to use. But for now, I guess this is conclusion of I guess part 3 of my scatterbrained I guess thought process, design process.